Potatoes have one of the more undeserved bad reputations in mainstream nutrition. Both sweet potatoes and white potatoes are whole vegetables with substantive nutrient profiles, and both have been caught up in decades of confusion about starchy vegetables, carbohydrates, and blood sugar that conflates the behavior of ultra-processed potato products with that of whole potatoes prepared simply. The more useful question is not whether potatoes are good or bad, but how the two most common types compare nutritionally, and, specifically, what the evidence actually says about their respective effects on blood sugar, since that is the concern most often raised when people choose between them. What sweet potatoes provide. Sweet potatoes have earned their reputation as a nutrient-dense food, and the most distinctive element of their profile is beta-carotene. A medium sweet potato contains approximately 120% of the daily value for vitamin A, delivered as beta-carotene that the body converts to retinol as needed. Beta-carotene is a fat-soluble carotenoid and antioxidant that supports vision, immune function, cell differentiation, and skin integrity. Eating sweet potatoes with a small amount of dietary fat, even a modest amount of olive oil or butter, substantially increases the bioavailability of this fat-soluble compound. Beyond vitamin A, a medium sweet potato provides roughly 25% of the daily value for vitamin C, 12% for potassium, and 25% for manganese. Manganese is a trace mineral involved in enzyme function, bone formation, and antioxidant defense that receives little attention in nutrition discussions despite its physiological importance. Sweet potatoes provide 4 grams of dietary fiber per medium serving, including prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria and contributes to microbiome diversity. Their natural sweetness comes from a relatively high natural sugar content, which is one reason their glycemic impact deserves careful examination rather than assumption. What white potatoes provide. White potatoes occupy a more nutritionally complicated position than their reputation as an empty starch suggests. A medium white potato contains approximately 19 milligrams of vitamin C, representing roughly 20% of the daily value. Lauren Maneker, registered dietitian, notes that this surprises many people who automatically associate vitamin C with citrus. The vitamin C in white potatoes supports immune function, collagen synthesis, and iron absorption from plant sources, and it functions as a water-soluble antioxidant in circulation. Potassium is where white potatoes genuinely stand out. A medium white potato contains 867 milligrams of potassium, roughly 18% of the daily value, and more than a medium banana. Potassium is an essential electrolyte for blood pressure regulation, muscle contraction, nerve signal transmission, and fluid balance. Americans are broadly under-consuming potassium relative to the recommended 3,500 to 4,700 milligrams per day, making white potatoes a meaningful contribution to correcting that shortfall. The resistant starch advantage of white potatoes. The most nutritionally interesting component of white potatoes for blood sugar management is resistant starch, and this is where the conventional assumption that sweet potatoes are automatically superior for glycemic control becomes complicated. Resistant starch is a form of starch that is not digested in the small intestine. Instead, it passes intact to the large intestine, where gut bacteria ferment it, producing short-chain fatty acids that reduce intestinal inflammation, improve insulin sensitivity, and modulate blood glucose regulation. White potatoes contain more resistant starch than sweet potatoes, and the amount increases substantially when potatoes are cooked and then cooled before eating. The cooling process causes starch molecules to recrystallize into a more resistant structure, a phenomenon called retrogradation. A white potato eaten the next day as leftovers, whether cold or gently reheated without reaching high temperatures again, delivers significantly more resistant starch than the same potato eaten hot from the oven or stovetop. Research consistently shows that resistant starch improves post-meal insulin sensitivity and reduces the glycemic response to subsequent carbohydrate consumption, making cooled white potatoes a surprisingly useful food for people focused on blood sugar management. The glycemic index reality. Preparation matters more than type. The most important finding from the dietitians consulted is that sweet potatoes are not automatically lower in glycemic impact than white potatoes. Riley Peterson, registered dietitian, explains that glycemic index data shows sweet potatoes can have a GI similar to or even higher than regular white potatoes, depending on variety and preparation method. Boiled sweet potatoes have a glycemic index of approximately 44, placing them comfortably in the low glycemic category. But baked or roasted sweet potatoes have a glycemic index that can reach 90 or above, placing them firmly in the high glycemic range and above many preparations of white potatoes. This dramatic range reflects a fundamental characteristic of starchy vegetables. Heat duration and cooking method transform starch structure in ways that profoundly affect digestion rate. Boiling keeps starch granules more intact because the water-based cooking environment limits the temperature at which gelatinization can occur. Dry heat methods, like roasting and baking, allow much higher temperatures that fully gelatinize starches, making them rapidly digestible and producing a sharp glycemic response. The same sweet potato that would produce a modest blood sugar rise when boiled can produce a substantial one when baked. This principle applies to white potatoes as well, which is why boiled white potatoes have a meaningfully lower glycemic index than mashed or baked white potatoes. The preparation and pairing principles that apply to both. Because preparation method has more influence on glycemic impact than potato type, the practical guidance for both sweet and white potatoes converges on the same principles. Boiling or steaming produces lower glycemic outcomes than roasting or baking. Cooling after cooking and eating as leftovers increases resistant starch content and further reduces glycemic impact. Portion size modulates the total glycemic load, regardless of the index value per gram, since a small portion of a higher GI food can have less total impact than a large portion of a lower GI one. Pairing potatoes with protein and healthy fat at the same meal slows gastric emptying and carbohydrate absorption, reducing the rate of glucose entry into the bloodstream and flattening the post-meal blood sugar curve. Adding a protein source like eggs, chicken, beans, or Greek yogurt, and a fat source like olive oil, avocado, or nuts to a potato-containing meal routinely produces a more favorable glycemic response than eating the potato in isolation, regardless of whether it is sweet or white. Both potatoes belong in a nutritionally varied diet. Sweet potatoes offer irreplaceable beta-carotene content that white potatoes cannot match. White potatoes offer superior potassium content, meaningful vitamin C, and higher resistant starch potential when cooked and cooled. The choice between them is best made on the basis of what nutritional gaps a person's overall diet has, what preparation methods they will actually use consistently, and personal taste preference, not on an oversimplified assumption that one is categorically healthier than the other.